Greetings, everyone. Thanks for coming out to another Brony Debates Live. We are broadcasting on Friday at a slightly later time this time, so we could make sure that we get all of our lovely guests that you see in this thumbnail picture here. I hope everybody out there is having a great time. Wow, we're just starting and we're already at 19 viewers. I love it, guys. Share this around with your friends. Let's get the biggest audience we can get. So, before we get started, I got to give a shout out to all of my generous supporters on Patreon who make my continued content creation and live streams possible. This goes especially for my friends on the $10 and up tier. These guys are Autoknight, Sodengirder, Senko, Jennan Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, who's on the very left of this frame here, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series of fan fictions. I would highly recommend checking out everybody's content in the description and thanking them for their support. If you want to be on these shows, I'd love to have you. We just need you to join up on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. With that being said, let's go down the line and say hi, everyone. DJ, how are you doing tonight?
Hello again. I'm here.
Good.
Yay.
Good. You feeling good?
Better than I was. I had a headache earlier.
Well, I'm glad you got that. Let's make sure everybody's got their headphones in. And Cruizer, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me back.
It's always good to have you on, man. And for the first time tonight, we've got a couple of people joining us. Past Analysis, one of the original Brony analysts in the fandom. How are you doing tonight, Past?
Pretty good, pretty good. I have a bit of a hoarse voice, but otherwise I'm fine.
Yeah, you do sound a little bit hoarse there. No pun intended, but we're totally going for it anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
And next to him, we've got another pun aficionado joining us for the first time is Silver Quill. How are you doing tonight, Silver?
Oh, thank you. I always carry this with me. No, I'm not a narcissist. Why do you ask?
Oh, that's great. So you doing good tonight?
I'm doing very well. Glad to be here. But Brony, how dare you? Always intend the pun. Own it, savor it.
Oh, you must not know me very well. I always intend my puns, but, that time it just kind of happened. And then...
Because it is second nature now.
Yep.
Embrace it.
Golden Fox is in the chat and he says, Ahem, I've been around longer than all of you. We'll run those dates later, but for now I'll take your word for it. And then next to Silver Quill in my thumbnail, we've got Dev. How are you doing, Deverer?
여러분 안녕하세요. 이것은 재미있었겠습니다.
Okay, now do it in Spanish.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? I don't know. What I said was, hello everyone, this is going to be interesting.
Yep, this is going to be really interesting. So, in case this is your first time tuning in to Brony Debates Live, we're going to talk about this topic for, 45 minutes to an hour. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them right there in the chat. In the last 15 minutes or so of the stream, I'll start reading them off, so I'll be collecting your questions as we get going here. So tonight's topic was suggested by DJ Skywalker over there on the left side of the thumbnail, and he wants to know if we were too hard on Friendship is Magic as analysts. So real quick, let me give my 2 cents here. Part of the reason that I originally got into analysis was because I thought that Friendship is Magic was being really harshly analyzed by some of the original analysts of the time. We're talking, when I really started participating in the fandom, it was DigiBrony and Brony Curious or Tommy Oliver, ANY. Those were the big three. Golden Fox was around. There were a couple of others whose names I can't remember, and they and a lot of them, in my opinion, just seemed to kind of miss the point of the episode, or they were, I would say, falsely attributing mischaracterization or plot holes to things. So that's how I got into it and wanted to start the Brony Debates flagship title there. So with that being said, I'm going to open up the floor. What do my guests think?
Well, to be honest, can we all agree that this is somewhat of a frustratingly vague question? I mean, where do you draw the line of what's too harsh?
All right, so
Well, I think-
let's set our definitions then. Dev, what do you think?
Well, one line in the sand I think we can all agree on is that if we're so hard on the show that we're going to harass the writers or any people working on the show in any way, that's just wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But however, upon saying that, though, I want to veer off and say it is different for us being hard on the show itself. So, and there are lines to be crossed. So, but I guess it goes back to the original question. Whatever I would phrase the question on this, were we too hard on Friendship is Magic as the show it was trying to be?
All right, yeah. So that's an interesting amendment to the conversation. DJ, what do you think?
Well, his first one was right. Yeah, harassing the people who work on the show is a step too far.
Yeah, and while that did happen, I remember Larson specifically saying on Twitter that, or it was either Larson or Josh Haber, but I remember watching one of them on Twitter say, you know, it didn't really happen that much. It did happen, and the fact that it happened is inexcusable in the first place. But I remember his specific words, I could count all of the instances of threats on one 8-fingered hand.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, so at least it's not as... We're not, you know, totally down the path of 4chan here. So,
Wait,
yeah,
was he?
as few instances there was, I'd still want to bring up the fact that there is a difference between us being on the show and then going to those lengths. So I think there is a line to be drawn between like we're going too far and the differences between that.
all right, so what were you about to say, Silver?
I'm just curious about the fact that he had an 8-fingered hand. Was he exposed to radiation? And is
I thought
this
you were
his
going to say
superpower?
a 4-fingered hand and have, you know, 2 hands, like a cartoon character.
I was going on Ninja Turtles.
All right, so now that we've set our terms, Cruizer, what do you think?
I think fans expected a bit too much from the show. I think when the pilot first aired in the first few episodes, I think people had this idea that it was going to be this huge overarching show like The Dragon Prince or Avatar The Last Airbender, when that really wasn't the case. In fact, the last time I ever spoke with Josh Haber, he said the show that we got was not originally in the cards, but when they saw how well these arcs did, they quickly rewrote a bunch of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
So what was the original plan, if you know the answer to that?
If I remember correctly, I think it was going to be more slice of life stuff. But again, like when they saw how well the arc with Celestia did and the overall with the writing in the journal like Dear Princess Celestia, they saw how much we really liked that, and that's when they rewrote a whole bunch of episodes.
That's pretty interesting. Pest, I don't think we've heard from you yet. What do you think?
So my general thoughts are that, I mean, I don't really think that we were too harsh on the show, honestly. I think that if we were expecting something that we never got out of it, then we would be, you know, on an individual level, we would be being too harsh on it. But I think with like every person we've talked about, with me, with you, with Digi, with Tommy Oliver, I think all of them, I mean, roughly around like season 4 is when you could say that Tommy and Digi started to get pretty critical. But I don't think that they were, I think that they were mainly going off of the previous seasons. They were, you know, looking at the last several seasons that happened and saying that it wasn't measuring up. In fact, personally, you know, I can't really speak much to Digi and them, but I can say that as the show went on, I kind of started to think that, you know, it was getting a little too high on its own ability to make certain things. Like they would do things for certain seasons and they would hardly execute on it. Perfect example, season 6. Starlight becomes, you know, member of the main cast, and she hardly has any episodes. Then you have, the instance with the school in season 8, where I don't think that they had that many episodes for it. I think that the show started to run into problems when they kept trying to come up with bigger and bigger season-long story arcs, and each and every time they could never really execute on it because of the nature of the show. It was, was made out from the get-go to be a slice of life show with a lot of episodes that aren't necessarily connected. So personally, I mean, if I'm going off what I think that certain plot points just shouldn't have been brought up. Like, I don't think that we gained much of anything from the school.
Mm-hmm. So then here's a follow-up question to that. What do we gain from pointing that out? What good does it to sort of call that out as an audience?
Well, I would probably say that the point of calling that out is to, kind of help them go back to their roots, go back to what made a lot of people like the show in the beginning, which was just that it was a good slice of life show with relatively simple arcs. Like, that was my biggest criticism of the show, was that it, after a certain point, it kept trying to be something it wasn't. And then there were moments where I could tell that, okay, they were kind of moving back to it. I thought that they had a fairly good last season. But the point of pointing it out is so that you kind of like make the show staff know that they don't have to keep doing these season-long story arcs. That if it's too much work to do and they're not getting much out of it, why continue to, break your head over the concept of season-long story arcs and wide plot threads that you can't ultimately execute on?
All right, so does anybody have anything to say about that?
Well,
I'd like
actually, I would too.
You go ahead.
Dev, you first.
No, I insist. You're the guest.
Okay. Well, it's funny that Pat says this, because I actually take the opposite view, that reviewing the show and talking about it really has nothing to do with influencing the show's future, but hopefully crafting a future with the fans. If I was going pie in the sky, I would hope that something I said in my videos helps a young fan refine their own sense of storytelling, and perhaps down the road they go on to fulfill a role that Lauren Faust performed. She was a fan of the original G1 My Little Pony, and she created her own version. Perhaps one day another fan will do that. And if not My Little Pony, then another story. I like the idea of critiquing as a means not to force a change in the present, but to build a better future.
And Dev, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I actually agree with Pass there, because think about it like this: if what Cruizer said was true about Josh Haber, and then, or was it Josh Haber? I can't remember. You can correct me after I'm done here. About their changing up episodes based on the feedback, then couldn't that same feedback tell them, okay, maybe we need to change back, or we need to commit to this more? Because my problem with the show is that it felt like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too, with the adventure arcs, but still have zany slice of life stories, which, depending on your view, might seem out of place compared to like either what's going on in the world, or it feels like the long story arcs aren't getting enough development and suddenly they just end.
Yeah, I can understand that. We haven't heard from DJ or Cruizer in a little bit. Do either of you have anything to say on that?
Well, the only problem that I actually have with a lot of, at least what fans have been doing, is when they put their reviews out there, to give kind of a different perspective here, when I look at someone like, and no, this is not kissing flank, but when I look at Silver's videos, when you did your review about, I can't remember the name of the episode, but you asked if the smooze wasn't really necessary for the episode. That was actually pretty well thought out, but it seems like with a lot of people, they are just doing the angry reviewer shtick for the sake of clicks, likes, and views, and I'm just not quite sure if that's the best way to get your message across, and the show staff might take that differently.
And some of them certainly did. We've had big Jim Miller a couple of times saying, that expressing frustration with some of the fans and reviewers for doing what you said right there, Cruizer. And yeah, sometimes I think taking the show out of its taking the show out of its context can sort of have negative implications on the fandom at large, especially when analysts tended to get angry at the show, and I mean like actual anger of not trying to figure out why certain artistic decisions were made or why certain storytelling decisions were made, and were instead just yelling at the camera or yelling into the microphone. That tends to have one of two effects on the fandom, but the ultimate, they'll either agree and mirror that sort of mentality and attitude, or they'll disagree and they'll split away from it. And this is how arguments start. And just generally, and when I say arguments, I mean not like the type of arguments that we're having here. I mean like the type of arguments where people are like getting mad at each other, and I don't like anything that sort of splits the fandom like that. So what do you guys think of that potential consequence?
You don't like it when I raise my voice like this?
You mean exactly like you're doing in this thumbnail?
As I make my declaration?
Scaring the little girl.
Oh God, I'm never going to be able to look at this picture of you the same way after hearing that voice. But yeah, but addressing the actual point here, what do you got for me?
Well, doubling back to what Pass mentioned, frustration that Starlight Glimmer didn't have enough episodes to really back up her introduction to the show.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of the circles I kept an eye on, people were very vocal about thinking she was getting too much attention, stealing it from the main cast. And I think that's part of the problem if you're listening to a fandom critique on the fly. Who do you listen to? The loudest, the most articulate?
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is why I tend to favor critique as with a future goal. I guess, although it's funny, recently the critiques of Cats and the original design of the live-action Sonic did invoke a change. They were vocal enough. I would credit the Sonic change owing to a lot of the artists who did their own version, and you could see the appeal. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what was going on in the executives' heads, though. I can't assign a motive there.
I think part of the reason why the Sonic change probably happened over, say, any other change that we were just talking about is that there was generally, everyone was kind of on board. I mean, not everyone literally, but the vast majority of people who responded to that were negative towards it. Whereas, like, if we were to look at, I don't know, Starlight in season 6, then yeah, there are cases where it's going to be muddled and it's kind of hard to kind of get your point across. So, I mean, I think you have a point. I think that you're definitely more constructive, I would say, than a lot of other reviewers and analysts out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, constructive in the sense that, with each one of your videos are intended to create something beyond the show. I think that's the case with you, with Dr. Wolf. Whereas I think that, people like Tommy Oliver, Digi, it was less about creating something beyond the show and more so, critiquing it. So, like, and there's a valid point to be raised about whether or not, like was what they were doing, was it helpful at all? Was it just like as helpful as venting on the internet? I mean, there's a fair point to be argued there, I think.
And if I could just add one thing, there's an old saying: you catch more bees with honey than you do vinegar.
True.
Yep.
I also like to make didn't the Sonic thing garner mainstream media attention too? So
that might have also had something to do with it.
Yeah, because we gotta remember, friendship is magic. I think at the grand scheme, outside the bronies, isn't that eye-catching to either the mainstream media or the general populace. So, I mean, we certainly catch the eye of other people out there. Probably not for the right reasons we don't want them to catch it, but yeah.
So, DJ, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. Do you have anything to say on all this?
Well, speaking as more of a viewer than any of you all that have done reviews or talked with people with the cast, sometimes seeing those negative reviews can also hurt enjoyment of the show. I've had that a few times where... sorry. Now stuck in my throat, sorry. Where seeing a harsh review or seeing a lot of the hate towards a character I enjoyed kind of didn't want me to enjoy it as much. Like,
but is that
one of my favorite characters is Starlight, and all the hate about her.
Well, that sounds like more the fault of the viewer for not being. Gosh, how do I word this without sounding pretentious? Screw it, I'm going to sound pretentious. Weak-willed, and lacking confidence in their own opinions, to be able to figure out where the balance is at the very least, or figure out how to prove somebody wrong if they think they're being too harsh on them. I'm going to shift gears over to Silver here, because I know, Silver, that you've done a couple of videos with a theme similar to that. So what do you think about what DJ just said?
Well, first off, to the comment of you catch more bees with honey than vinegar from earlier, has anyone tried to catch anything with vinegar?
Flies.
I'll tell you this, vinegar is really good at getting stains out of stuff.
Well, makes sense, but you can't...
I wondered that if the harsh criticism could then lead to getting the bad writing or directions out of the show, maybe. Well, that's hyperbole.
Probably not. What? I'm afraid I'm a little scatterbrained because I've been reflecting on this week where, in fact, fans having a very negative opinions and being very vocal about them has actually been something of a theme.
Really? How so?
Okay. This past Sunday, 2 events. The end of the latest Japanese Sentai series, what usually becomes Power Rangers, Dino Knight Ryu Soldier, ended. And fans wrote very lengthy articles about why they were so disappointed. On YouTube, the end of the latest season of Doctor Who has spawned tremendous vitriol. I mean, people are making their displeasure known. Egads. Let's see here. Doug Walker, nostalgic critic, did a review of the first Raimi Spider-Man, and listening to him, I thought, dude, you're really harsh on these. He's much more critical of them than I'd be. And then last night, most interesting of all, and I think this touches back on crossing the line and the concern of negativity. Has anyone here ever heard of the Eye of Argon?
Gosh, I feel like I have, but I can't remember what it is.
Rusty.
Sounds familiar.
It is a fantasy novel, or I should say a fantasy story, widely regarded as one of the worst. It is something of a subject of ridicule, but I learned about it last night and the rather tragic story that it was started by a 16-year-old, published widespread without his consent. And the ridicule and general negativity turned him off to writing for the remainder of his life. He passed away at 48 years old.
Wow.
So talking about negativity, there's an art to offering a critique. And as you guys say, pure negativity, it may be entertaining, it may feel powerful at first, but it turns people away in the long run. It's exhausting. It demands tremendous energy, including for the audience to pay attention. They might get caught up in the fervor, but it's like running a marathon. Sooner or later, your adrenaline's going to give out. And then you're left with a very negative feeling.
Well, time for me to sound pretentious, but if you are going to put your craft out there, you got to be prepared for the feedback. Although, in this case, it sounds like he wasn't even prepared to put his craft out there yet, because it was published without his permission, if I heard you right.
Yep.
Yeah.
The publishing company took advantage, I think, of his age, and this was pre-internet.
Ooh.
So it's true that you have to be willing to accept criticisms when you put your creative work out there. But I think you also have to be willing to say, you know what? Forget that guy. He's a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of on that point, one of the episodes in the show happened in season 7, I think it was. Honest Apple, I think, is a particularly bad episode because it's kind of the exact opposite of what you just said. I think that with all criticism, when you're a creator, you need to take it with a grain of salt. It's unfortunate, but you kind of just have to build up your tolerance to jerks. Whenever you make, a book, YouTube videos, whatever it is, you need to build up your tolerance. And I think that in that case that you were talking about, I just don't think that guy, as you mentioned, it was put out without his permission. So, I mean, sort of like the example of someone taking something from, I guess, a person's diary and then vocalizing it. I think that I kind of agree with Deverer that if you put something out there, you need to be willing to take the criticism, and part of it is a learning process. Like the first time you put something out, people might criticize you for it, and it's kind of like building up your tolerance to that negativity.
Yeah, and if I may butt in for a second here, Past. So you said about being ready to be stronger than people who are just hating on your work, and I just want to throw out there real quick that that's a good lesson for life in general. It's just life is so much easier when you're not afraid of people, but can also take the things that are even meant to be destructive towards you and find the nugget of where the critique is and where to improve from there. So does anybody have anything they want to add to that before I get on to my next point?
There is definitely a skill to be learned in separating the actual criticism from the insults too. So, and in this day and age in particular, with purposely being vague here, because I don't want to open up any can of worms, it just seems like in this day and age there is a lack of critical criticism, and instead focusing on, let's just say, superfluous aspects.
Well, I do agree.
This goes way beyond Friendship is Magic, by the way. It goes down like most media out there.
Yeah.
Right now.
What were you about to say, Cruiser?
I just think, well, for starters, two things can be true at once. Yeah, you do need to learn to, deal with, criticisms, even some of the harshest stuff. However, there's a fine line between being, having constructive criticism and just being a jerk.
Yeah.
I will add to that. I agree with you all saying that it's important to learn that skill of finding the critique. But at the same time, having enough self-respect to not be subservient to the most hostile approach. If someone isn't putting the effort into communicating, you have to respect yourself enough to sometimes say, I don't need to expend the energy paying attention when you're not investing the energy to talk with me.
Well, then you do it for your own sake, but not for his. It's like so let's imagine this, for example. Let's say the year is 2012 and you're starting to make your first pony video, but all you've got is the internal microphone on your iMac MacBook Pro 2011. Don't ask me why this example is so specific. And somebody gets onto your comments section and goes, what the frig is wrong with your microphone, you dirtbag? I'm purposefully pulling back my language here. What do I look at that and say, okay, I guess I just have to quit, or do I say, okay, obviously there's something wrong with the audio, so how do I learn from that? How do I better my audio? And I start looking at, and I do that for my sake, of self-improvement rather than for anybody else, because I know I don't have their viewership anymore anyway, kind of thing. So here's a question I want to ask of everybody. Does critiquing, I guess friendship is magic, but anything, does the analysis go too far? Is the difference of it being good negative criticism and the difference of it being bad negative criticism that goes too far and is too hard on it, is this line of separation there more in the line of how good is the analysts themselves? So to give an example of that, an early video I did was when I started doing A Buck to the Face, and I started on season 4. What was it? Castlemania. And Digibrony came out with a video, saying all these things about how nobody should have been the Everfree Force in the first place. It doesn't make sense that Fluttershy was helping Rarity. It doesn't make sense that Applejack and Rainbow Dash were at the castle. It's contrived that they were all there in the first place. And I zoomed in on the screen and said, okay, listen up. We've seen Fluttershy have an interest in the textile arts before, and tends to bond with Rarity over some stuff, and it was implied in the opener that the forest is a lot less dangerous now, and a couple of other points, and I just ended by, pay attention, because basically what was going on there was people not paying attention and just making the video as fast as possible with as little effort as possible, and that was... and that started to split the fandom up, as I was talking about earlier. So, very long-winded introduction to that question, but now I'm going to open the floor. What do you guys think? DJ, I haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Oof, kind of taking me out of the element there. But I guess as a viewer, that's kind of a hard line to...
Well,
I think I can
pass that off.
Yeah, well, pass it off. Someone take it.
Kind of first off, I want to make a distinction. I think that there is a difference between a good analysis video and a good review video, and I think that by the time season 4 came around, there was so much analysis out there that the community, I kind of felt, started to dry up in terms of like individual topic points. So that's where I think a lot of reviews started to come out around season 4. But I would generally say that the difference between good analysis versus bad analysis is good analysis explains why something is there, and it tries to break down what's going on. Bad analysis is probably kind of alluding to what you're talking about, that is almost obtuse in that it's not really trying to understand what it is they're talking about, and it's kind of like a review, but it's masquerading as an analysis. I think that would...
Yeah, back in the day when it was really starting to get oversaturated with episodic analysis, and as soon as an episode would come out, everybody was just racing to be the first to upload their video. That was a huge point of contention, is everybody wanted to be called an analyst, but everybody, I'd say 3/4 of us, probably more, were just recapping without any sense of irony or self-awareness. What do the rest of you think about all that?
There's a difference between...
Sorry, go ahead.
There's definitely a difference between someone who just gives a synoptic readback and reaction to an episode, and then breaking down the individual elements and explaining why they do or do not work.
Yeah, and that was the crux of the argument back then. Cruizer, what do you think?
Well, kind of going back to what you said, because I remember, this was a long time ago when, I think it was the beginning of season 3 with the Crystal Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Spike essentially saved everybody. Then Tommy Oliver released his video saying how much he hated it, and declaring that Spike has no concrete characterization because he said he went up against King Sombra in that episode, and so he doesn't buy Spike being afraid of something. When in reality, no, Spike never did fight King Sombra. he just dropped the crystal heart and he dove in after it. So I think it's also people trying to seem much more smarter than they really are. It seems like everybody wants to be taken seriously, but they don't actually keep tabs of either the episode or taking notes about the characters they've written about. It's just like you said, trying to be the first one to put a video out there.
Or in the case of Firebrand, they want to be taken too seriously.
Aha! If only he was here to hear you say that.
Oh, I can hear.
Hang on, I have an objection, if you will.
Go for it.
So, too seriously, this has gone. I know Firebrand's made this thing with it, but I've always had a slight bit of contention there. For as big as Friendship Magic is, this community, and the way we are making freaking cons about this and all that, are we taking it too seriously in the positive way, or the fact that we are making all these things to express our love for the show? Is it really sane? Is it really too seriously if we're saying, hey, this is bad, what are you guys doing? And like, as to bring up what Pat said before, this isn't measuring up to what you said before. So, hey, what's going on? Because in my experience too, we have the whole analysts being too harsh for the sake of clicks. But I've seen some fair share of videos where I felt like they were trying to be sugarcoating everything, say, hey, I love this show, it's still all happy, you know?
Can you give an example of that?
So I can't, it's been a long time, but I just can't remember the exact videos, but it feels like there are some of the episodic reviews try to be out there just to be the first to say something, right? But when they are talking about things, they don't really either explain why something was either wrong or right. And usually too, when it comes to some subjects of like more controversial episodes, like let's say I'm trying to think of that early example here.
Mysterious Ne'er-do-well. Feeling Pinky Keen.
Fame and Misfortune.
No, I'm not a controversial to that extent. Just like an episode where it's like muddling mundane, but like I'm losing my train of thought.
Put words on it. I'll give you a minute to figure that out. Does anybody else want to chime in on this?
I would.
Go for it.
Actually, I think I can build a little bit off what Dev said earlier about the critique of sugarcoating or trying to force positivity, because that's a critique against my own videos. And I will give an example. When I reviewed Castle Sweet Castle, the first episode to tackle Twilight's new castle and her moving into it, I talked about the design really did not mesh with the town. You know, these hay thatched roofs and this rustic look, and then all of a sudden there's this jagged crystalline structure.
The Fortress of Doom meme.
Doom. And I pointed out, okay, what happens if we flash forward? Would the town change to match the castle? Would we see more crystalline structures in like a flash forward? I put that out there, and some folks criticized, "Oh, you're just trying to make excuses. You're being dishonest. You're trying to steer the review in a positive direction rather than just being forthright." And so that could be a thing. Also, I will say we did get our flash forward, and I did see the town change.
Yeah, even a cobblestone street would have helped blend the styles a little bit better, at least in my opinion. But were you continuing, or should I pass it off?
I would like to continue with one other thing.
Yes.
I am so grateful to Pass for distinguishing analysis versus review. I do think that a great many videos are reviews expressing a personal opinion. I hold the opinion that not all opinions are created equal. Sometimes I get the sense that a person started with wanting to be negative and worked backwards.
Oh boy.
And that usually it's something you feel over time. With enough consistent negativity, you realize that that's their default rather than a sincere reaction. But I do think there is value in just expressing your opinion in a review. Because when I got into this fandom, watching videos, I didn't have anyone I could talk to about this. You don't go, hey, did you watch that show that's intended for young kids, especially girls? Everyone would back away, and rightly so. Watching a YouTube video where someone articulates their opinion, a lot of people share that feeling but aren't sure if they're the only one. So getting to hear someone voice those thoughts can be extremely satisfying and maybe even a little assuring. I've lost track of how many times I've heard people say, am I the only one who feels this way? And I will make a blanket statement. If you have to ask that question, I guarantee the answer is no. Other people feel the same way. You're not alone. So there is a value in reviews in helping people perhaps find a way to express their own thoughts and feelings. Giving voice when maybe someone has a hard time constructing that flow of thought. That's
an excellent point. I find that there's been a couple of times where I've had trouble forming my own thoughts on an episode, so I've gone and listened to like You Were Past or Golden Fox, sometimes even Dr. Wolf, and from there I've been able to get a grounding point. And I do the same thing when I'm writing too, like especially a story. I'll go out and I'll ask somebody for advice, and it's usually once I start bouncing ideas off of somebody else that I can get a better anchor as to where I should be in my writing and where the writing should go. So I can definitely attest to what you just said there. Dev, do you remember what you were going to say before you lost your train of thought?
No, I don't. So in the point of like sugarcoating, I'm afraid I got to drop it since I have no evidence or examples of cite. Although what Silver said did make me want to bring up a different kind of point though.
Yeah.
And that like our own opinions and all that, like we definitely have our own opinions and all that. But I just felt like on the community side of things, like the negative opinions on places like Derpy Bro and Film Fiction in particular, and forums and like that, it just felt like unless you were in the specific groups that wanted to criticize and whatever, like negative opinions, at least in the first half of the show, weren't really looked upon all that greatly. So I think that's why maybe in some reviews, some people wanted to be that guy, hey, I'm going to be the negative guy and say something bad about this show we all love, you know?
Okay.
And I think it throughout the show, there's always been a back and forth about how seriously you can take the show. And my contention is that if we really want to call this, like, this show is my life now, whatever, and all that, like, this is the greatest thing ever, why can't other people just say the opposite, like, hey, I thought this episode was stupid, or this was the worst thing I ever saw, you know? That, of course, is all hyperbole, but it's like, it's not bad to have negative criticism. In fact, negative criticism helps us grow. And of course, there is definitely the wrong way to deliver it when you're trying to say your analysis is analysis when it's actually your reaction review.
Yeah, but the question of tonight is, where does the line lay of where it becomes harmful, and did we meet it? I thought I heard somebody take a breath like they were about to speak. Who wants to add to this?
Well, I kind of had a point I wanted to get in earlier. From what Silver Quill said about people kind of working backwards from their conclusion. So I kind of agree with that, but I would add a little bit of a twist to it. I think a lot of it, I mean, again, particularly around season 4, what happened was you had people who had like a negative take on the episode, and then they analyzed their negative take to make it sound smarter than it actually was, or to make it just sound smart, period.
So I got a question for DJ specifically then, because all of us here have been in the fandom since it started, or since season 3, but you came in with Equestria Girls in season 4. So how did all of this, and that's when the analysis saturation really started to gain speed. So how did all of this look to you from the outside at the time, DJ?
Well, when it first started and when I was looking at analysis stuff as season 4 was going, to me everything seemed, I don't want to say completely positive, but there seemed to be still fresh enjoyment for the show. But as the seasons have worn on, I started seeing more and more of just people not enjoying the show, and we're constantly throwing out accusations and just
And
I don't want to say just general negativity because that sounds completely whiny. But it just kind of got to the point where I started wondering whether people actually were enjoying the show anymore.
Yeah,
yet they still kept talking about it.
It's certainly a question to ask, and I remember we had a character in the fandom for a while. His name was Biter, and every single week we just had to ask this guy, "Why are you still here?"
I can add to that.
Go for it.
I was part of his, I think it was season 4 retrospective, where we talked over 2 podcasts. We talked about every single episode.
Mm-hmm.
And he hated, I think it's not hyperbole to say he seemed to genuinely hate all but 2 episodes.
All's Well That Ends Well. I remember that one. What was the other one?
I think it was season 4, not season 1.
Yeah, All's Well was season 1. Truth be told, I can't quite remember which ones garnered the positive reaction, but I genuinely asked him, have you grown beyond the show? If it draws this much of a negative response, is it worth your time and energy? Never got an answer, but I think he did decide where to invest his energy as he moved on to other things.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that.
And I think, kind of to add to that point, I think this really did start around season 4, but I think the general reason this stuff started is that once you get into it, it's pretty hard to get out of it. It's pretty hard to, once you get into the habit of reviewing the show episode by episode, week by week, it becomes hard to get out of that habit. I think that, as a general principle, there were times in the show where I definitely thought that, I was on the verge of giving up. Granted, I had given up on analyzing, years before that point, but, I think that after a certain point, it just becomes habit, and it's kind of hard to break that habit.
But past analysis, I need my dopamine rush of YouTube comments.
I put the dope in dopamine.
Dev, what are you saying?
But Silver, you are a dope.
Yes.
Anyway, I like to build on what Pat said, and I just think once you get to a certain investment in the show, you start building up your own expectations, And I think a lot of people, when you have a finale Candlelight Wedding, and then an open the Crystal Empire, you're wondering what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, you have Magical Mystery Cure, which a sort of event happened, and then you have season 4, and then you have Twilight's Kingdom. So you're thinking, wow, is Friendship and Magic really going into a new direction, all that? And then a lot of people were unhappy then with Starlight Glimmer, and then in season 6, all of a sudden Queen Chrysalis comes back, and it's oh my god, what's going to happen now? And all of a sudden, we got the Pillars now, and all of a sudden Friendship School, and all of a sudden blah, 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 blah. But I just feel the more you get invested, the more expectation you have. And now, there's one other thing I forgot about that I wanted to bring up here, way back in the beginning, or bring up now that I wanted to bring up back in the beginning, was that, now I can't cite this, but I do think I remember reading that Lauren Faust, one of her original intentions with the show was that she wanted to have it first be a slice of life-esque show, then transform it into an adventure show. And I feel based on the episodes alone, I don't fault people for thinking that's what the show is going to evolve into. But I don't think anyone would say this is if it came on the level of Avatar or anything like that. So I feel a lot of people's negative reactions could have come about from expecting that the show would become more adventure, but we still have slice of life, and then people would think, hey, where's the adventure? Why is this getting so little, And we can talk about the qualities of the episode base by base, but I just feel
but
expectations plays so much into it.
But why does that matter in terms of how we react to the show? Now, Cruizer, I haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you think about all this?
Well, personally, I think, kind of going back to what someone said earlier about when they become a bit too invested. I've actually heard some criticisms that, to me, don't even sound like actual criticisms. They sound like minor nitpicks.
Give me an
Like,
example.
Okay, like someone wants to know how Big Mac got his cutie mark in Applejack's flashback episode, but we didn't really find out. It was just kind of, poked at us. And to say that, it's going to have this big of a negative effect on you because you don't know how he got his cutie mark, that's kind of petty. I mean, there's some things that we really don't need to know. I don't need to know how Big Mac got his cutie mark. I don't need to know how old the girls are. It's basically just useless trivia that you'd like to know. Don't try to pretend that it's going to, like, the show's. Don't pretend that the show's going to crumble if you don't know this information.
So.
And I would like to make a comment.
Yeah, go for
on
it.
Expectations. I'd like to ask, whose fault is it for those expectations? Because maybe it's just from my point of view, but the show always had the pattern of the premiere and the finale being big events, and everything in between was just typical episodic stuff. Why would they change that pattern when it was pretty obvious to me?
Well, it sounded
why
like
would these expectations grow when the pattern was clearly obvious?
it sounded like people were waiting for an actual season-long arc, like something like we would have seen out of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Exactly.
And we just never got that, and it soured people's taste. Now, whether or not it should have is a completely different story. But what I saw most commonly is after a season was over and we had the big finale event, people would always ask these questions, and they'd have a million questions about plot points, and say, oh, this is a plot hole, or this never got addressed. And more often than not, yes, it did. And I was usually able to point out to people where their critiques were addressed. So does anybody have anything to say to that?
Actually, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go. Who talked first? I didn't. It sounded like Cruizer to me.
Cruizer.
Okay. Basically, one of the things that I've actually told people is that, sometimes a certain character, story, or scenario is just not going to work for you, even if it does get answered by either a staff writer or someone like, say, you or Silver points it out. I'm willing to guarantee that you're still not going to like said character, story, or scenario. And you know what? That's fine. You don't have to go on some big, huge, long-winded answer to explain why this quote didn't work, because chances are it did. It just didn't do anything for you. Or another example is if the show did actually mess up some sort of plot point, you can just say, yeah, they screwed up. That's it. You can keep it that simple. You don't have to get so worked up over it.
Just call it that they flurry-hearted a situation.
I don't get it.
Shots fired. I don't like Flurry Heart. I don't understand Flurry Heart. Flurry Heart upsets me. I'm gonna make a 45-minute long rant video about it and call it analysis. And how dare you say I'm a reviewer?
I'll go you B. I'll make a 3-hour video about Cozy Glow.
You've seen the
When
thing.
did you all turn into Mauler?
What were you saying,
You've seen
Piss?
the
Hey,
thing
I love
that,
Mauler.
Miss Anthropony posted when Flurry Heart came out. The whole Klaus from American Dad, ranting and over it was Flurry Heart. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Please don't say Flurry Heart came out. You're making me envision the pregnancy.
And I work at a hospital.
Okay, just real slight diversion.
Yeah.
Look at the size of Cadence's hips. Look at the size of Flurry Heart's head. I've never been a huge Cadence fan, but all of my empathy lies with her.
Are you sure we're not the ones taking it?
Oh God, the implications.
Oh.
Alrighty then. So
this got to.
I think what Silver said is an example of being taking it too seriously.
But it's comical.
It's having fun.
yeah.
Well, why did you notice that detail and make that conclusion?
Okay. So Silver, what are you trying to say?
Well, let me walk through this.
Yeah.
You look at Flurry Heart's design, and you notice.
No. Before that, you goof nugget.
Oh, Well, funny enough, it was along the same line of thought. Going back to Cruizer, the not vital question of how Big Mac got his cutie mark.
Mm-hmm.
Flash forward to where the apple lies. Big Mac is just wrapping up telling how he got his cutie mark and his name.
That's okay. That's the episode.
So, you're right that none of that is vital to the story, but it's there. It's something to tease the audience and ask for an emotional reaction. And you can give that reaction. I might, if I ever work through my backlog and talk about that episode, I might say something like, "Why must you tempt me so?" And that's it. Sometimes you just give a comedic release of tension, and that's all that really needs to be said. And again,
sorry, go ahead.
And again, when Flurry was first introduced, there was a lot of critique about her design, especially the wings. So a part of me, looking for humor, looking to have just sort of an exhale, drew a very, very strange conclusion that I've now shared with you all, and none of you can get that image out of your heads. What can I say except you're welcome?
They hate you.
All right, so
I'm wondering how big Silver's head was when he was a little chip.
well, that just begs the question of, do hippogriffs and griffins give mammalian birth, or are they hatched from eggs?
Oh my gosh.
Actually, I read one fan fiction that said males are birth normally, or I don't know, one gender is birth normally while the other is from the egg.
Well, the obvious conclusion here is that it's somewhere in the middle, which would be closer to how fish reproduce. Good. Let that sink in. Anyway,
This has got very off topic.
yeah.
So, are any of you going to ask how my mom met my dad? I mean, why don't we go on?
Let's reel this back. I'm getting the ballot if I need to get this back on track.
Yeah. So let me. Well, Silver, were you about to say something? I'm sorry.
Well, I actually wanted to double back to the original question. When is going too far? When do you go too far with criticizing? Or even when you're praising? If you ask me for a blanket answer, I think it comes down to when you try to force your opinion as the norm.
I think that's only one thing about it, because it's just such a complicated answer that I think just discussing it to figure out the parameters, especially when it comes to show by show.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what Silver is trying to say. So what do you?
Well, hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. I'm getting there still. So you have the Big Mac's cutie mark thing, in a show like Friendship is Magic. That's interesting, but it's not really a criticism of the story, perhaps, because these are just, for the most part, it's supposed to be a slice of life show, And while the lore and all that is interesting to Friendship and Magic, it ultimately isn't the focus. It's a nice backdrop and setting setter up there. I love words. It's not really the main focus and all that, but when you have a show like Avatar, which is really big into the lore, and some of these questions might be more important, then the criticism value changes.
Okay. Silver, were you saying something?
I was, but I'm going to switch gears because I believe this is the 5th time we've brought up Avatar.
Well, it's the best example we can think of off the top of our heads for season-long story arcs.
And it's valid, but as someone who didn't get to watch... Actually, I confess I haven't watched Avatar. I was going through a phase.
All right, my friend, you and I are going to sit down after the stream, and that's going to be your weekend.
Oh, dear.
I'll get the shades and padlock.
Ooh, kinky.
I knew that was coming.
I'm going to break that soundboard, my friend.
That's it. I'm getting the ballot.
But I have to ask, as I'm guessing many of you saw it as it was coming out?
Yeah.
I didn't, but yeah.
After the fact.
Hey, you can't say after the fact without owing me a quarter.
I think I got one right here somewhere.
Okay, so what are you saying, Silver?
I would love to see old forum posts as it was coming out seeing how people set expectations or voiced, hey, I'd love to see where they're going with this, and then to see their reactions as these plot points were either met or
Not
let go.
So let me tell you. Yeah, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
The thing about nostalgia or hindsight is that we tend to cherry pick our histories. And it's very possible that a lot of what we ask about here in the Brony fandom and being too hard on Friendship's Magic, people could also, in the Avatar community, may have been just as critical, but it wasn't, it's not remembered because the overall package was such a positive experience. Fast forward to 10 years from now, and people may not even remember a lot of the, well, they may have more negative or more positive recollections of Friendship is Magic.
So let me tell you something real quick here, Silver. Is there was one episode of Avatar The Last Airbender that apparently had a really bad fan reaction, and we're talking like in 2003 when forums were just starting to becoming a thing. And then and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler here, in the third season, the characters are all watching themselves in a play as interpreted of the events of the previous 2.5 seasons by the Fire Nation, and then they get to that part where in the play where that would have covered that particular episode that had such a bad fan reaction, and they literally said, "Hey, there's that place, that the whole audience knows about and hates. Let's just fly right over it." And then it just...
Let's skip it.
Yeah, it's just... and that was it. That was that part of the play. So apparently that was the show staff's response to their criticism of that episode. So with that being said, I'd like to move on to the next part of the show, if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, real quick. Go for it.
I just want to add in one last thing. So this whole conversation is kind of... Like, I came into it thinking that we weren't too hard on MLP, but maybe we were. I mean, because my whole point is that if our expectations were getting out of control from what the show was doing, then we were being too hard on it. And I think that in terms of the season-long story arc in particular, I think that, yeah, we were too hard on it. Because, like, as we were talking about, the show had never done a season-long story arc, and particularly in season 4, that's when all the criticism towards the season-long story arc was coming up. But it's like, did we have any reason to think that the show would have been amazing on this regard? I don't think that we did. I think that we had more reason to be skeptical, or simply kind of like we wouldn't know what the result was. So in a way, yeah, I guess we were too hard on them, MLP.
Welcome to Brony Debates Live, my friends, where we change past analysis's mind. And I've learned a lesson too. From now on, when I refer to something super popular that had a very good season-long arc, I'm going to talk about G.I. Joe Renegades, because I know we've all seen that show. And if you haven't seen that show, go fix it. It's only 2 seasons, and it's very good.
Right, okay.
Yeah, all right. So I'd like to move on to the next part of the show here. We've gone a little bit over time, but it's been a very good conversation, so I'm not worried about it at all. But now we've got some interesting comments and questions from the audience. And if you guys are out there listening still, and you still have a comment or a question that you'd like to read off, now's the time to put it in the chat while we get through some of this other stuff. So starting from the very beginning, we had Zodia195 in the chat. We might know her better as Pristine. And she says, for me, analysis crosses the line when at the end of the day, you take it too seriously, and it's not a big deal. At the end of the day, we know it's a show all for entertainment. So what I'm getting out of that is we're being too hard on Friendship is Magic when our analysis of it is affecting our lives, our greater lives outside of the fandom one way or another. What do we think about that, DJ?
I think she's directly spot on. If your hatred of if you are hating the show so much that it takes over your, something needs to change.
In fact, I got a funny story about that. The day that Magical Mystery Cure aired, and we all know how much I hate that episode. It's the only episode I've only watched once. That was just a bad day.
Interesting.
It was just a bad day. It was a very bad day. And a number of other things completely unrelated to the show went wrong, and I sat down and I'm like, okay, now I get to watch the new episode of Pony. This always calms me down, and I'll be, functional enough to go to work at this job that I hate, that takes place at night on the bad side of town. So I watched that show, and it was so bad, and I got so angry. And then I had to leave and go to work, and I was even angrier than anything else, and I tried to shut the door, and the door didn't shut behind me, and I just snapped, and I headbutted the door right off its hinges. Have you ever been so angry that you headbutted a door off its hinges?
I've seen you do other things, but...
Not headbutted, but...
Not so
super effective.
Now listen, it's funny in retrospect and from a third person perspective, but in that moment that was definitely not healthy. Don't do that.
Well, I would argue that's definitely more for the outside circumstances, and that was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
I suppose so. Cruiser, what do you think?
Well, I've certainly seen you do crazier things.
I doubt that, but okay. We're being too hard on FiM when it affects our daily lives. What do you think?
I do think there's at least some truth to that. I do understand the being obsessed and having trouble letting go of something, but this is also what happens when you try to live on social media. Yeah,
that's definitely not a good thing. Past.
I'm inclined to think that she's completely on the money. She's right. I mean, if it's affecting, like if you become mad from the show and that affects your day, you are taking it too seriously. I need to take that lesson to heart in a lot of other shows. But yeah, no, I think she has a point.
I'm getting an awful lot of yak smash in the comments of the chat, and that's making me particularly angry at myself.
Not perfect.
Silver, what do you think?
It's hard because no one is ever a blank slate watching a show. There's a lot going on in your life. There's a lot of perspective, a lot of thoughts. Sometimes being mad at the show is more just a proxy for bigger issues. And it's like, there's a way you can vent your frustration. There's a way you can say, I'm mad. And this is just a reason to be mad and let it out. So I don't know if it's always you're taking it too seriously, as maybe it's just the most convenient release valve.
Interesting.
But then there's also the question of, are you really going to take that out on other people?
Yeah, I suppose so. Or take it out on your poor door. Dev, what do you think?
Well, I think if you're going to let that affect your life, yeah, you're taking it too seriously. But I think just venting your frustration, as Silver said, isn't really taking it too seriously. And if it might just be a natural reaction and just I mean, I think there's a difference between the investment to, say, friendship and magic versus something like, and I'm using this example very purposely, Game of Thrones. So I think in that regard, yes, you definitely can take it too seriously, letting it affect your life like that. However, if it's just an angry reaction in that moment, I don't think it's really taking it too seriously. Just, you got your entertainment denied, so and you want to be disconnected from the harshness of the real world, so...
All right.
Ending, what an ending, bad ending. I'm so mad now, it's an ending.
You rehearsed that.
No, improv.
Alrighty then. You're much better at improv than I am. Okay, so Paladin Pony T. Which episode do you remember hitting on, or hating on, we'll say, too hard, and then later changed your minds? For me, it was the one where the yaks got introduced. And I didn't think the lesson of how to handle a situation like that was very accurate. And then a number of reviewers afterwards pointed out that, yes, that's actually how it should be done in a diplomatic setting. So, Dev, episode that you hated that you changed your mind on.
Gauntlet of Fire. Still don't like it, but I don't hate it.
Alrighty then, can you give me an example of why in 3 sentences?
I was overblowing the my own criticisms, and that what I was expecting was actually kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
I just still think some of the setup is still too contrived and silly.
Okay. Silver.
For me, my least favorite episode remains A Candlelight Wedding Part 1. A lot of the positives of A Candlelight Wedding lie in the second episode. I think if I went back and rewatched it, like you, Brony, it's one of those, I saw the first premiere, I was like, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
If I went back now, I think I'd probably be less hostile, but only because I followed the breadcrumb trail of complaints I had about the episode to the central problem. And once you can grasp that, I think it's easier to accept an episode because you understand the central issue.
I see. Past.
So this would be pretty easy for me to answer. I'd have to say Applejack's Day Off. When I first saw that episode, I hated it, and I actually really like it now. I think it's a really good episode.
Why is that?
So when I first watched it, I kind of felt like when we got to the very end, when AJ and Rarity are back at AJ's farm, that like the episode was completely it was poorly structured. It just wasted my time. But watching it over again, knowing what would happen, ultimately kind of makes me enjoy it because it kind of makes me realize that the whole episode is kind of illustrating its point that you shouldn't kind of taking too long to get to take care of
See, that's what I was telling everybody when it aired and nobody listened.
No, but I mean, really, on the second watch, it's much better because now I know how it's going to end. But on the first watch, it was a bit disappointing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Cruiser.
For me, that would actually have to be the Parent Map episode. Because when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, I've seen this kind of stuff before. I mean, I couldn't hate on it because it's still primarily a kid show. A kid has not seen other media that has done this. But however, the more I watched it, the more charming I saw it. I saw the episode. And not to mention also when DWK pointed out that Starlight's room is basically meant for someone who listens to black metal. And I'm thinking, wait, black metal? She started a cult. Oh my god, this is making way too much sense.
Yeah, Starlight was an emo grunge teen mess.
She was into black metal. Trust me, that is way worse.
Oh man, I've just never been about that life, but I can't tell the difference. DJ, what do you think?
There's only one episode that I remember ever getting angry at, and believe it or not, it was the season 5 finale when Starlight was redeemed.
Oh,
because at the time I didn't like her.
Well,
but in hindsight, she's become my favorite character.
We should just get you and Heather Blossom hanging out so you can spend all day agreeing with each other.
Looking at it, is awesome. I like it even more.
Yeah.
So
I felt like I was one of the few people who actually like Starlight. I like to say people don't.
I like Starlight. I never had a problem with her. All right, moving on.
Well, I will defend her motive in and out because I think it makes sense in context, and especially what they were going for. And
well,
season 7 saved her character.
I've hung out with DJ outside of the chats and outside of the Patreon, and I swear he feeds off of people's hatred for Starlight. Anyway,
you can't prove that.
Yeah, no, I can't. Ariel Warner wants to know if any of us wanted a redemption arc for Queen Chrysalis.
No.
Resounding no. All right, that was easy.
Well, depends. Like, if they didn't make her just a 2D, if they actually built off the idea of having to feed her people, then maybe. But no, they just turned her into a generic bag.
All right, so Zodia159 or 195 or Pristine says, "Hi, Pasta," and gives you a big hug and says, "I've missed you."
Oh, well, thank you.
Golden Fox says, "I was afraid of dropping the anger because I was worried I'd get humiliated." Now, here's something I'd like to say to Golden Fox. And I don't know if it still matters now, probably not. Like, I might be telling you this years too late, but humiliation is sort of a self-inflicted type of emotion. The only way that it would backfire on you from a community standpoint is if you realize you were wrong and changed your direction or something, is if you were inconsistent and made yourself out to be a hypocrite. So what do you guys think about what Golden Fox said here? I was afraid of dropping the anger because I was afraid of humiliation.
Well, we do talk about a show of pastel cartoon horses. Pride is subjective, but honestly, anger. I genuinely believe that anger is a gimmick. We feel it in a moment, but if it's your running shtick, it won't last. And if you feel like you have to be angry to be entertaining or to get your point across, then I feel like you're behaving towards an illusion rather than bringing your sincere reaction. If you no longer feel angry, good. Just keep going with it. Be sincere in your thoughts, and don't worry about it if other people like to say, "Hey, you're not angry anymore."
And anger is a poisonous emotion, which means, it's good for you in small doses, and in the right context, it can make you stronger. But if you overdose on it, if you're just angry all the time, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to kill you, or you're going to develop an immunity, and it's going to make you numb to other emotions, which is certainly just as unhealthy.
And oops.
Kind of adding to what you guys were saying, generally I think that we are more embarrassed by I think in the case of Golden Fox that I know what he's referring to, and I think that it was always the case that people were never as embarrassed. They never really took it the wrong way as you kind of thought they would. That there's a certain point where you can kind of build up an image in your head of this is how you ought to behave, and if you veer away from that behavior, then people are going to really judge you for it. But I mean, the case of anger with Golden Fox, nah. Dude, when you got angry, people could tell. People could tell that you were rightfully angry.
Mm.
For me personally, if someone were to have actually dropped the angry shtick, I would actually be paying attention more, because it's there's this sea of all these angry voices. But I guess to kind of give an example, if someone actually raised their hand and said, "I thought the Super Mario Brothers movie was great," I'd think, okay, I'm curious to hear what you have to say here.
Yeah, anything that breaks from the norm is going to draw attention. Continue your thought.
Yeah, because to give a couple of other examples, there is this great channel on YouTube called Good Bad Flicks, a guy who actually looks at movies that have been dubbed so bad they're good. Or there's another channel called Reruns who looks at bad video games, and he'll try to find the positives within them. That's a lot harder to do. Anybody can shoot down bad media using an angry voice, but if you can actually say something positive in a more uplifting tone, you have my attention.
All right. And moving on here. Bigorna wants to know, so on what episodes or elements, especially from the earlier seasons, did you guys appreciate or hate less with time? Which in some ways is a repeat of the question that we just had. But yeah, so let's adjust Bigorna's question here for him and go the other way. Was there anything that with time you look back on and wish you had been more harsh with? Let's start with Cruizer for this one.
For me personally, not really. Because if something makes me that angry in the show or just in any kind of media, then there's no point in going back to it. I mean, there's definitely been like episodes that I really do not like, but I'm not going to, make a big fuss about it.
All right, Past.
That's a really hard question. I guess I would say season 8. I mean, with season 8, I was kind of like just going through the motions. I didn't really mind much of what was going on in it. But like, if I was judging season 8 by the same standards of every other season, I think that I probably would have been, and probably should have been, a little bit more critical.
Okay, Silver.
I don't know if I get angry about this, but I think I would talk more about the abbreviated timeline between events. Ponies plan a royal wedding in a day. They have They arrive for a coronation like hours before the event, and maybe not even hours, 10 minutes. In some ways, I accepted that this was a episodic show aimed at a younger audience. That maybe it's asking too much for them to have this timeline planned out. But at the same time, looking back, I think there was an opportunity for good stories around these events. And I don't mean a season-long story, as we've been talking about, like in regards to The Last Airbender, but rather a season-long theme. We had a theme with the keys and the Tree of Harmony's magical box that I thought worked well. I'm surprised we didn't get more of that in later seasons, as I thought it was very effective.
Or how about just a build-up like they did with season 1 in the Grand Galloping Gala,
Well, again, that's thematic. There were 3 episodes with each character having their own reaction to getting ready for the gala, especially Rarity. So I think that works, a thematic umbrella under an event.
Alrighty then. And Dev, what do you think?
Stop treating Spike like a sidekick and making him the butt monkey.
Okay, is that something you would have criticized harder as you went on?
Yes.
All right.
Especially the moment that sealed it for me was in the MLP movie where he gets turned into a pufferfish. It's like, come on, guys. Or no, wait, not even before that, turning Spike into a dog at Equestria Girls.
We should have changed him
being a dog.
We should have changed him into a seahorse in the movie. But I guess the rest of them were technically seahorses anyway, so whatever. Moving on here. Master Code, Ace Analysis, says, I think everyone here agrees that I am the smartest-ness. Objection! Jinx! I'm sitting at a wooden desk, I win.
See, the thing is, I was inclined to agree with him, but he didn't give any evidence, so, I kind of have to say no.
Overruled. Okay. What do you think, Silver?
I will default to the Big Lebowski. Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
And as we established earlier, not all opinions are created equal. Bigorna says, I hate that episode where the ponies do that thing. Bigorna, you're banned for wrong think. And last but not least, okay, those of us who have, Pristine wants to know, do we have a favorite fan project that we either enjoyed watching or being a part of? Dev.
Turnabout Storm, watching it was awesome.
Nice. Yeah, just last week I had the guy that made that on my Friday Night Fight show. We were playing. He kicked my butt in Dragon Ball Super. He's a real good friend of mine in real life. So Silver, what do you think?
Well, gosh, I'm racking my brain right now because there was, for a time in seasons 2 and 3, there was a fan who made very short animated videos just on a scene in an episode.
Was it Mr. Poninator?
It may very well have been. Pardon me while I search YouTube, but I remember enjoying those because they were this nice little comedic accent to the episode themselves.
I remember one he did was the scrunch off. And Lyra just rolls up on Bon and goes, "Scrunch metal, go!" And then it's just super intense staring contest that ends with a book getting shoved in Lyra's mouth.
Was it one of the running gags was ponies getting sent to the moon? And no, it wasn't. Do you like bananas?
I actually can't remember what you're talking about.
I'm struggling as well. So my YouTube search. Oh, I hope the videos weren't taken down.
Well, since you're having memory problems, I'm just gonna say okay, boomer, and move on to it. Past.
Fair enough.
So, if I was going to give you a comedic answer, I would probably have to say everything that DWK has ever done.
Yes.
Because DWK is just hilarious. Probably, his best work, I have to say, it's still his Stranger Than Fanfiction synopsis. That one was particularly great. But if I had to give you a more serious answer that was just all around great, probably Lullaby of a Princess, with the animation with Celestia and the singing of it.
Oh, I see.
I mean, really, really, that is something that I think will always hold up.
All right.
So in terms of,
Cruizer.
For a project that I was not a part of, I have to go go with DWK. And as funny as he is, the other reason why I like him so much is because he says stuff that I think a lot of people need to hear. Like, one of the best lessons I ever learned from him was friends aren't people who don't piss you off. They're people who are worth forgiving over and over again. That's something that I think a lot of people need to learn.
Pony point of view. That was a great episode.
As for something that I was in, it's a toss between two. The first was when we did a Buck to Face with Legend of Everfree with you, Brony, because I got to hit you with a guitar.
Yeah, I got hit a few times that episode.
And the other was the Jasper Pie crank call video we did with him because...
Oh my god, that came out so good.
Thank you. Because originally when it was just going to be, a video with just, boxes and subtitles, because that's all I could really do. I don't have, the skills that Evan or you or anyone else here does. But when we got the audio track back, Evan's like, this is too good to not film. We have to make a full-fledged video out of this.
Nice.
And it was so worth it.
DJ.
Well, for just watching as a viewer, I'd say it's for just a lot of people's stuff. Silvers, Bronies. There's just so much creativity in this fandom that it's hard to pick just one.
So your favorite was A Moment with Brony on Dr. Wolf's channel. That's your favorite. I'm just going to put that right in your mouth.
I'll boost your ego even more. Boot to the face.
That's literally what I just said.
But for a project I was a part of, well, I've never been a part of any video projects, but on FiM Fiction, I was part of a big group that I'm kind of glad still exists to this day called The Displaced, where we kind of created this huge there are many different stories that all kind of interconnected in their own little universes and stuff, and authors would cross over into each other's, kind of like how the analysts would do with their Rift and stuff back then.
Oh, heck. How come I didn't know about this before?
Because it's all kind of human and Equestria stories with epic powers and stuff and bunch of tropes. But it's because of that I do have the friends I do have now. And it's kind of what kept me as a writer for a good long while, even though I've kind of fallen off. But those stories still exist. The friends I have now that I talk regularly with, they are from that group. That's how we all met, even though we've all fallen out of it. And that's just the project we were.
Yep.
Oh, did DJ just get really quiet for everyone?
No, I had no trouble hearing him myself.
Well, then it's just me.
Okay. And for me, anything by Brutal Weather, anything by Duo Cartoonist, and Pony's Anthology. Those are my favorite things to watch in the Brony fandom. I also love music so much. I love the music that we Bronies create. All right, so that's it for the questions.
Well, actually, can I ask one more? Because I saw this way earlier. I thought it was interesting.
All right, yeah, go for it.
How would you guys rank the seasons now?
Season, I'd put season 4 at the highest. I don't know what I would do about anything else below that. Season 5 is a close second. Real quick, what do we think, guys?
I'll go since I asked it. For me, it's a toss-up between 2 and 5. 1, 7, 4, 6, 3, 9.
Oh, wow. Silver.
I've never been great at ranking things. Season 2 remains my favorite of the seasons, partly because of the nostalgia of getting involved in the fandom, being aware. So there's factors beyond just the episodes that I enjoyed. After I have my favorite, I really don't worry about the rest.
All right. Past.
Probably my favorite used to be season 2 for similar reasons, but season 7 really kind of just owned it. I love season 7. It's great. And I probably would say season 8, it's kind of the worst for me.
Cruiser.
Fortunately.
Because I'm a bit of a music nerd, I had to put my favorite season at the 4th one because I was so song heavy. There were some really good songs throughout that whole season. As far as my worst, it may be cliched to say this one, but I'm just sticking with it because I just didn't think it was that good, and that was season 3. Sorry. And as far as everything else, you guys can figure that out.
All right, DJ.
Season 4 means the most to me, so I'll keep that at the top. And then I'll just say my least was season 1. It's the most boring to me, and I don't ever really go back to rewatch it.
Okay.
Everything else is pretty equal.
So that's all we got for the questions. So let's wrap this up here. Closing thoughts. Let's hear from Silver. Were we too hard on FiM? Let's hear it.
I think any creative work that connects with you is going to engender strong reactions. And so I think if you said, yeah, people were very hard, you'd be right. But at the same time, I don't know if that makes you guilty. I guess that's one thing we didn't really talk about. Are we guilty of being too hard? You cared, you put forth strong opinions. Okay, that's part of being a fan. So I think I will say, yes, there were times where we were too hard, but that doesn't make us a terrible fan base.
Okay.
I would also just really quick like to give a shout out to Persian Poetess, because when we were talking about analysis versus review, her study of Blue Flu, as seen in Three's a Crowd and Discord, is, in my eyes, one of the best examples of genuine analysis.
Yeah, I remember that video. That was a great video.
Yes.
All right, yeah. So let's go down the line here. DJ, closing thoughts.
It's been great getting to hear everyone's opinion on this. I do still kind of think people were too hard on FiM, but maybe not to the extent that the internet originally made me think.
All right, Cruiser.
I think I'm in a similar boat with DJ here. I still think that there were people who expected at least too much from the show, and there was definitely too many people who were using anger for the sake of clicks, likes, and views. But perhaps it wasn't as bad as the internet led on to be.
Past.
I would generally say that we were, ever so slightly too hard on MLP. I think that just when you look back on it, we should have been a little bit more. We should have tempered our enthusiasm for the show at certain parts, and I think that the fact that we didn't kind of led to this negative, kind of being a little too too negative in cases like season 4 and onward.
Alrighty then, and Dev.
I don't think we were, although I will agree that the methods about going about it were misplaced, like the aforementioned clickbait, anger, and just focusing on the wrong thing entirely. Like, you're focusing on the wrong issue, so that's what I think that would make it seem like we're being too harsh, but I don't think it. Like, the passion and desire to critique fairly is there, but you're just going about it wrong.
Alright, and to put in my 2 cents, I would say if you're going to critique something, have some effort and some artistic integrity. If there's something you don't like, try to figure out why you don't like it, put some words to it, try to figure out why the decisions were made, learn about the artist, and try to be constructive in a way that you offer a solution, or at least, be able to answer the question, how would I do it better? That's what I think good critique is made of. As long as you're doing that, you're not being too hard. Then, that is something that artists should do with each other, because that's how we all improve how we do things. And that lesson can be applied to just about everything in life, really. And with that, I'm going to close this out. It's been a very good, nice and long conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Past Analysis and Silver Quill, for joining us for the first time. I hope you gentlemen had fun.
I did. Very much.
Good. So now we get to, the credit sequence here. So thanks everybody for coming out and watching the stream, especially if anybody stayed for the whole thing. You guys make this all worth it. I'm very grateful to my generous Patreon supporters, especially at the $10 and up tier. These guys are Autoknight, Sodden Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, our friend DJ Skywalker here, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Be sure to check out everybody's links in the description. They make some great content of their own. If you want to be on the show, I'd love to have you. We just need you on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and every little bit helps. If you want some more live streams with me, we got a live stream tomorrow night on Princess Heather Blossom's channel, where I'll be reading the chat with her while she does some crocheting. Next week on Friday, we've got Friday Night Fights with a patron-suggested game, and then every other week we do another Brony Debates, usually on Wednesdays, but I'm thinking about moving to Thursdays. Anyway, that is all. Thanks again, everyone, for coming out. Thanks again for everyone joining me. This was an amazing stream. I wish they could all be like this. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
안녕히 가세요.
What he said.
I just like to end on a song.